DW Africa Link.
The president of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Felix Tshisekedi, says he's open to a third term, warning that the 2028 elections may not happen if the war in eastern Congo continues. Meanwhile, calls for a constitutional revision have intensified in recent weeks. His predecessor, Joseph Kabila, delayed elections beyond the end of his mandate in 2016, which resulted in deadly protests and international condemnation. So is history repeating itself? Just how dire is the security situation, and is it enough to justify a third term?
My problem is not remaining president. My problem is end the war first of all.
You are listening to Africa Link, the podcast that connects you to the stories that matter across Africa. I'm Lucy Riley, your host for today.
Africa Link, every weekday here on DW.
The roots of today's conflict in mineral-rich DR Congo go back to the mid-1990s, when the Rwandan genocide ended and millions fled into the country, including armed fighters. Their presence set off a brutal struggle for territory and resources. In the decades since, the conflict has claimed around 6 million lives, making it one of the deadliest crises in the world, according to the Council on Foreign Relations. The UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, puts the number of displaced people nationwide at more than 7 million. Now, to present day, at a press conference held in Kinshasa on the 6th of May, President Tshisekedi said, and I quote, "I have not asked for a third term, but if the people want a third term, I will accept," end quote. The Constitution limits presidents to 2 terms. But a bill is currently moving through Parliament that would allow those clauses to be revised, and that has fired up the opposition and sparked a wider debate. For more on this, we are now joined by Timo Roujon, head of Konrad Adenauer Stiftung Kinshasa, a foundation that supports democratic development. Also with us is our DW correspondent, Wendy Bashi. Timo, I was reading a report where opposition leader Fayulu said, "It seems that the war in the east of the country is being deliberately maintained, and that President Felix Tshisekedi is allowing the war to continue so as not to organize elections." That's a serious accusation. Does this claim hold any truth to it in your analysis?
For sure, it's a very serious claim, but we have also to say that when we regard the situation, it's not like the government wants it. So I would say to say that the government is somehow maintaining the war, I think is a little bit over the top. However, it is clear that the right now situation, so we have now, I would say, a stabilized but still serious conflict, but like the skirmishes, the intensity of the fighting is quite low. So in the end, you have a part of the country which is occupied, but however, the rebels seems to be, and also the persons like supporting the rebels seems to be quite okay with the status quo right now, occupying the east.
Rwanda-backed M23 fighters have withdrawn from several areas in eastern DR Congo's South Kivu region, including the key town of Sange, after growing pressure from the U.S. To respect a ceasefire, which is something you've mentioned. But I'll loop you in here, Wendy. Since the president made those remarks, how have ordinary Congolese and even opposition parties been reacting to the idea that he could be entertaining extending his rule to a third term?
I think right after the press conference of Felix Tshisekedi, who was on May 6th, the 6th of May, the opposition says that Tshisekedi is using insecurity in the east as an excuse, as Monsieur Roujon said previously, to delay the elections. And right after the press conference of Felix Tshisekedi, Martin Fayulu did also a press conference where he says that now the opposition is working together. They want to find a way to bring everybody on the same page, and also they have promised in this press conference that they will very shortly plan a schedule of actions here in Kinshasa. I think some people here are waiting for this schedule to know exactly what they will do. But for the average Congolese, I think this is the political questions. I think people today, they just want to have a good life, to have jobs, to be able to live in the security cities. So maybe all the eyes are now on the opposition leader, and they are waiting for the words, what they will say, and the plan of action that they are planning to communicate in the very future days.
You've been covering these reports for over the years now, Wendy. And, when you say that the opposition has a schedule of actions, what would that look like? I mean, is that protests that they're likely to do? What would that look like and mean for the ordinary Congolese people?
Even if people want to go in the streets and to protest, they're a little bit afraid. This is why I'm saying that people are now waiting for someone to lead them. And this will be the role of the opposition. This is what Martin Fayulu said, actually. And even when journalists ask, this will not be the first time for you guys to tell people to go in the street. He said, yes, this will not be the first time. We know what we are fighting for, and be sure that we will communicate exactly with precision what we are planning.
Timo, let me loop you back in here. I mean, President Felix has been in power since 2019. And, the fighting that's been going on in the East has been going on since the 1990s. What has he achieved so far, President Felix Tshisekedi, in terms of bringing stability to the East in the term that he's been in office?
I think he didn't manage to bring stability in the East. So if we see the situation deteriorated since his second mandate in the East, clearly. But however, he really achieved of turning this momentum. So let's face it, the Congolese and the Congolese forces, the FARDC, they lost the war. So they lose the two major capitals. Big areas of the Kivus is occupied now from the M23 AFC. And Tshisekedi managed to turn the momentum, even though he is the loser so far of the fight, of the war, to turn it in a certain way to create a discourse that the Americans and also other political forces join him and now sanction Rwanda. So he made a turnaround, and now he's somehow imposing himself in the public sphere, like now we're gonna win the war and we're gonna get it everything back because the Americans are on our side, even though then black on white on the paper, he completely lost the war and mismanaged the army for now since the 8 years he's been in term. So in that, we have to say, is quite impressive how he managed to create this turnaround in the discourse, going out from the loser, from now a position in power where he feels confident enough of attacking the fundamental texts of the society, so the constitution.
And you've talked about him mismanaging the army and him saying, they're going to win the war. Is this realistic? I mean, this is something that's been going on long before he came into power.
Even though you're going to sign now agreement, and even though there is international mediation, it doesn't solve the conflicts, the rivalries, the demographic pressure in the region, and also which are at root cause as well for that conflict. So right now, even though you have international mediation and diplomatic efforts, you cannot really guarantee, or I don't see how an agreement with the Americans or in Qatar will solve the underlying issues and reasons for the conflict.
That's a very solid point. Wendy, let me loop you in here. I mean, paint a picture for us. What is the situation actually like on the ground, Wendy?
So I think if you look at the picture in the eastern part of the Congo, and especially regarding the security matter, the picture is not very good. The picture is very dark, actually. And I don't think that the situation will change in the future. As Monsieur Rougeant said, we have many mediation that have been held in the US, the other one by the Qatar, but on the ground, the situations remain the same. And in some places, the situation is going from dark to dark. So the situation in the eastern part of the Congo is not that good. And when you talk with the people here in the streets who in Kinshasa, who have a look on the situation in the eastern part of the country, you can feel that people are very sad and ashamed that this situation is going on since 30 years. And this part of the country, it's like another country now, because the country is divided. We have to say that also. If you are in Kinshasa and you want to go in Goma and Bukavu, it's another country actually, because there is another administration there, there is another way of being there, and you have two countries within the same countries, and the situation the same since a long time. This is not the first time that M23 is taking cities in Congo. We remember that they did it in 2020 until 2021, and then they back up in Uganda and in other places in Congo, and then they have came back. So the situation remained the same. The solutions are not so efficient. Maybe some people said they need a dialogue, but Tshisekedi has clearly showed that he doesn't want the dialogue as the opposition is suggesting. So I think this is the statu quo that Monsieur Roujon was talking about, and somehow the situation have benefits for some people.
Interesting that you say that.
Mm-hmm.
That this situation is benefiting some people, and that's something that we don't talk about as much. But just to play devil's advocate here, I mean, when you look at the elections are scheduled or slated for next year, 2028 rather, how prepared is the country realistically, to hold these elections on time? Is it possible, Wendy?
The question was asked to Felix Tshisekedi during the press conference about the elections, and if we look at the facts, the CENI, the structure that is in charge of organizing the election, hasn't communicated so much now, because we still have 1 year before the election. So they didn't communicate. They still have many things to do. This is also a question. And the other contradiction that some analysts have mentioned recently, Felix Tshisekedi said that he doesn't want to make election without the two Kivus, because as I said previously, this part of the country, the Congo, it's on another administration.
Maybe I jump in there. So right now, the president is suggesting of doing a constitutional referendum. So we have this very, I would say, ironic situation that on the one hand, you say we cannot do elections because two major regions of the country are occupied by the enemy. But on the other hand, right now, he's suggesting a constitutional referendum for changing the constitution, even though a referendum cannot be held as well in the eastern provinces. And I think that makes the situation even more bizarre right now.
And interesting, I was actually coming to this point that a bill is making its way through the Congolese parliament, to allow the president to revise some of those clauses, like the 2-term presidential limit. Walk us through that process and the likelihood of this actually happening, whether there's a possibility. I mean, you've just talked about it's not possible to be held in one region. So what would that process look like?
So right now, I think we have really I cannot imagine how a credible referendum can be made right now. And I think that also turns to the question. But when we look into different examples around the world, we have, for instance, Ukraine, where the eastern provinces are occupied by Russia. There as well, elections were postponed because in the occupied territories, people couldn't vote. So I would say that the process of delaying elections when a major city is a major part of your country is under occupation, I think it's maybe a legitimate point. But then you can also say, okay, in this regard, we are also not in the measure of doing a constitutional referendum because people being affected by this referendum won't be as well able to vote. So right now, well, there's a problem because normally the Article 220 of the Constitution clearly says that the president can have just 2 mandates, or that's the Article 70 who says that a president can just have 2 mandates of 5 years. And then there's the clause of intangibility, so Article 220, which enshrines this provision by prohibiting any amendment to the limit of mandates or to also curtail other fundamental rights. So it's not enough to create an amendment for being able to stay in power. You have to create a new republic. And right now there are already voices circulating in the majority. No, we are not going to do a revision of the constitution. We want to write a new constitution, because then the clause of the mandates would be, the counter would be set at 0 again. But any amendment or revision of the actual constitution doesn't allow, even though we formulate some clauses, for President Tshisekedi to stay in power. However, Article 70, paragraph 2 says that to avoid the void at the head of the state, so that there is no president in charge, a president can stay in power provisionally until the new elected president is installed. And the CENI, so the Independent Electoral Commission of Congo, can declare that because of major forces, force majeure, we cannot hold elections, for instance, because of security or occupation. And this has then to be validated by the Constitutional Court, which can accept the demand of the CENI and delay the elections. And now it is important to look within the two bodies. So the CENI is majority held right now by members of the government and close to the government, and same from the Constitutional Court. So during, as long as the occupation, the CENI has a force majeure of saying that she cannot organize the election, and the Constitutional Court, since it's close to the government, can just validate this demand. So right now, I think the chances of simply not having elections and keeping Tshisekedi in the term of office is more likely than a really revision of the constitution or a change of constitution and declaring a new republic.
That's very interesting, those 2 points that you've talked about. You know, if there are major forces like security or occupation, and also the validation from the Constitutional Court are maybe a more likely route to him. But just I want to understand just how dire the situation is, and if it's enough to justify those 2 clauses coming into play for President Felix to justify now a third term.
Let's say, as you already mentioned, the security or the conflict in the East persists since 30 years. So also 2016, Kabila used the same argument to postpone the elections by 2 years, even though the situation worsened since then. So back then under Kabila, you can still speak of insecurity. Nowadays, we really have a occupation of the territory by the armed forces of M23 and AFC. So the situation for sure worsened. However, we have to say that the Congo, since 30 years, the government also have some neglects the East in certain regards, because the main economic interests are in the South and in the capital. So as long as the South is stable and creates enough revenues for Kinshasa, the country can maintain a certain stability and operationality. So, let's say, regarding this tendency of the country of also continuing proceeding, I would say almost business as usual, even though there are phases of high conflict in the East, I would say that regarding back in the history, didn't the conflict in the East not always hindered the government of fulfilling or not fulfilling its duties. But for sure, right now we have clearly to say there are some more than 5 million Congolese which live in occupied territories or which have to fly their homes. And I have to say that for me, I think it's a justified reason for delaying their elections. However, it's not a justified there's no justification for the presidency not trying to find an inner Congolese solution to the conflict, which would also address the root causes we talked about earlier.
I think we'll come to an end now and close with you, Timo. I just want to hear from you and broaden the perspective a little bit. I mean, are we seeing a pattern across Africa where security concerns are used to postpone democratic processes? I'll give you an example. Here in Kenya, just recently, Kenya was considering postponing polls due to unrest in certain parts of the country. But then it sparked immediate public backlash, and then it was quickly walked back on. But the same situation has been playing out in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Chad, all of whom have postponed elections indefinitely following military coups, citing insecurity. So is this becoming a convenient playbook for leaders, especially who are seeking to extend their grip on power?
For sure, security issues, we see this pattern, but I wouldn't say that you can really compare them with each other. I think in a lot of, I would even go further than saying we are postponing democratic processes. We are really dismantling democratic institutions in a lot of countries of the Sahel. We have also in Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, we see that even though elections in itself is no guarantee for transition and for people to be heard. So in this, I think the security is not the only reason for this democratic, I would say, backslide. It is one of a factor which is used in certain cases, and but in general, I would say that it's more than that. It's really like you are attacking the fundamental rights of your citizens by taking security concerns or by justifying it through security concerns. And I think that the international community should be more aware of the situation, especially Europe and the US, I would say, are quite divided on a lot of questions about government in the African continent and are quite silent about the processes going on. And we can wish that there is, especially the people wish. And I met some leaders of the party of Kabila recently, and he said, hey, back then, 2016, when we didn't organize the elections, when President Kabila was trying to held in power, there was a lot of contestation and a lot of pressure coming from Europe, from the European Union, from the US. Where is this pressure now that we are figuring the same situation?
Very interesting conversation, and definitely a lot more to unpack, perhaps in subsequent podcasts. But Monsieur Timo Roujon and Wendy Bashi, thank you very much for your contribution to this topic.
Thank you very much for having us.
Thank you.
Get the stories that are shaping the continent here on Africa Link.
Just recently, Rwanda-backed M23 rebels pulled back from key positions in South Kivu after U.S. diplomatic pressure for a ceasefire. But with so many layers to this conflict, what do Congolese people think about their president and how he's handling the crisis?
Even though we take another president today, he will face the same obstacles. Do you think that's because Felix Tshisekedi passed away, another president will come, will put an end of the war? My problem is not remaining president. My problem is end the war first of all.
My opinion on that is to see him working on the election because he promises a lot. I want it. The election, we have to have a president again in 2028. I was a bit disappointed. You see the roads, students are studying in difficult ways. So I was a little bit disappointed. So I don't want it again. I want someone new.
There is no need for elections now. Let peace come first, and then we're going to work. There is no matter about it. He has been doing a great job. Yeah, he's a good guy.
He will not stop war. This is his second time to work as the chairman of this big country, but things are as they are. How can he be happy to postpone election? For me, we should go. We can make the election.
Bunagana before was also under control, but there was election. If we consider the fact of having election is only to free Goma and Bukavu. What about other parts that were under settlement of Rwandan oppression before? But for referendum, how are they going to vote for the new constitution? Which means if they can as well do election.
We can't do election here without Goma. They are Congolese like us. They have to participate in the election. Yes, we have to wait.
Those were the voices of ordinary Congolese caught in the crossfire. What do you think? Can peace finally take root? Share your thoughts with us on Facebook and on TikTok at DW Africa. Listen to us on Spotify or wherever you get your podcast. And don't forget to subscribe to our DW Africa YouTube channel. This show was co-produced and edited by Eddie Micah Jr. I'm Lucy Riley. Thanks for listening.
DW. Made for minds.